Arkham Origins is most known for being one of the worst Arkham games in the entire series, that award recently being given to Suicide Squad. But once Arkham Knight released, it was pretty clear that it was the one game left out of the pack, as it's completely neglected by most people, as everyone knows the game franchise by the Arkham trilogy, not realizing that there's a fourth game in there, and it was released after Arkham City 2. That really put the pressure on for the developers at WB Montreal, and to everyone's surprise, it didn't live up to expectations like we all thought it would, as the game overall was really buggy, the story itself was the shortest out of all the games, and the side missions weren't all that amazing. Or were they? Yeah, there are 10, but has anyone really sat down and thought about how good or bad the side missions really are in this game? That's why in this video, we're gonna be going over every single side mission that Batman Arkham Origins has to offer to answer the question, are Arkham Origins side missions really worth playing, or are they just filler content? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now let's get into it, shall we? The first mission we're gonna go over is one that most people who played the game probably have no idea exists, and it's the Cyrus Pinkney plaques mission. And before we get into it, please type in the comments if any of you actually knew this existed, because I've played the game countless of times, and this is the first time I heard of it when doing research for this video. But back at the topic at hand, within the side mission, as you roam around the streets of Gotham, you find these red plaques spread around the city, and when you scan them in detective mode, it appears that a piece of paper is hidden within the plaques, which turns out to be journal entries made by Cyrus Pinkney, who is an architect who helped develop old Gotham in the 1800s, and also worked alongside Amadeus Arkham and Solomon Wayne, who is an ancestor of Bruce Wayne. But once you collect the first one, Alfred mentions that Pinkney is part of Gotham City's longest running cold case, as he was killed the day before his 40th birthday, with the killer never being found. But as we collect more and more of these journal entries, it's revealed that not only did Cyrus fake his own death with the help of Amadeus Arkham, but was also extremely instrumental in the murder of Henry Cobblepot, who is one of the Penguin's Oswald Cobblepot's ancestors, as Alfred reveals after the final entry, was reported to be the cause of a car accident not long after the death of Cyrus Pinkney. And once you get to the final location of the last plaque, which is on the casket of Pinkney, and go into detective mode, you can see that there's no skeleton found within the casket, which just confirms, aside from the journal of him admitting this, that he faked his own death and killed Cobblepot himself after attempting to poison him at his own birthday party. In my opinion, this is probably one of the coolest missions in this entire game, and most people probably don't even know it exists, because there's never any prompt for the player to ever scan these plaques in detective mode, only that there's basic information surrounding them. It more or less allows the players to try to put the pieces together on their own before they find the final plaque, which reveals everything, as at the beginning of each entry, Cyrus puts the date, and we don't find these entries in chronological order, just in a random sequence. It really allows the player to play detective and think critically about the story at hand, which I think was implemented perfectly, as this mission is hidden really well, as the majority of players, including myself, had no idea these existed. And for those who did find all the plaques, it gave them a really interesting storyline to follow, along with a case that you could potentially solve yourself before reaching the final plaque. I don't think this mission was filler content whatsoever, as it's a very unique mission within the Arkham games, as the closest thing that we have to this are the Spirit of Arkham symbols that you can scan in Arkham City to get the Chronicles of Arkham audio logs. The only negative thing I can say about this mission, however, is the fact that the plaques themselves are really hard to find, and you'll have to search the entire city to be able to find them all. But other than that, which isn't that big of a deal, the mission is very worth the play, and the story of Cyrus Pinkney is honestly really well done, and it keeps you hooked as you get through them. So overall, this is not filler content whatsoever, and is definitely worth playing through. Next up is the Anarchy bomb side mission, which becomes active once you've finished up the Deathstroke boss fight, as when you're exiting the final offer, Anarchy appears on the television, spreading a message across the city, introducing himself and talking about how corrupt Gotham is, which pretty much everyone already knows. And once you leave the building, he shows up once again, this time talking directly to Batman, telling him that he had planted 3 bombs across Gotham where Gotham's corruption is at its strongest, and gives Batman the choice of either letting them detonate or defusing them in time. And once that's over, you grapple up to this platform and talk to an Anarchy supporter, in which he gives you a message straight from Anarchy himself about where the bomb is located, which initiates a 3-minute timer to successfully get to the bomb and defuse it, while also taking out the thugs that actually planted the bomb. Once you've done this pattern 3 times, Anarchy tells you to meet him at the courthouse where his boss fight takes place, and it's pretty much a regular section but with 3 waves of enemies, and only in the last wave is when Anarchy gets into the fight himself. The boss fight overall is pretty easy, as all you have to do is leave Anarchy as the final takedown and you get him instantly, as the only threat he has is the electric rod that he wields. Overall, this mission was okay at best, purely because the final boss fight was just a normal combat section with a lot more enemies, and the bomb defusal was just really repetitive overall. There was no challenge in this whatsoever other than the time you had to get to the bomb. Now, if there was a stealth section involved in one of them, or if all the bombs had different tactics you had to do to get to the actual bomb and defuse it, I wouldn't be mad about it, because you get a different challenge every time. And yes, I do know there's a time limit, but Anarchy could very well have just changed the rules and stopped the timer for a stealth section where if you're caught, it detonates, for example. But instead, we just got the same exact thing 3 times in a row and a really bad boss fight. I just think there could have been more to this mission other than just combat training. But I think the only redeeming part of this mission is talking to Anarchy when you capture him at the end of this mission, as he lets out all of his anger and straight up tells Batman how he feels about him and the city, and what a negative impact he is on it. Overall, I wouldn't recommend doing this mission unless you want 100% the game, because in my opinion, the work you have to put in versus the reward you get at the end is not worth it in the slightest. I think Anarchy had a really big miss opportunity in this game, and it sucks that they never brought him back in Arkham Knight or used him in both the other games, because he was just Two-Face's replacement in this game if I'm being honest. A really repetitive mission with such a letdown of a boss fight. Sound familiar? Penguin's caches are up next, and we'll briefly speak about this one, as right off the bat, I'm just gonna call them filler content, as by the end of the mission, we don't even get an interaction with the Penguin, as we just follow a lead that Barbara aka Oracle gives us on Penguin's army caches around Gotham, and once we destroy all 6 of them, we get a little cool conversation foreshadowing Barbara's eventual partnership with the Bat family. It isn't a very long mission, but it's pretty boring and repetitive to do, as well as really irrelevant to the rest of the game, as it just springs up on you randomly and is just disconnected from everything else. Bird and the Blackgate Prisoner side missions are going to be tackled together, because they're both the last of the non-villain side missions in this game, since technically Anarchy is an anti-hero and you never talk to the Penguin. But anyways, first, let's talk about the Blackgate Prisoners, which is only unlockable after the main story is finished and all the case file reports have been completed, in which Commissioner Gordon will contact you about some of the Blackgate prisoners that are still roaming the streets of Gotham and ask you to apprehend them and bring them in. Now, there isn't really much to do this mission, as you fly across Gotham and find all the scattered prisoners and interrogate them after beating up a bunch of thugs, and there are 20 of them you do this to throughout the mission. Now, because of what this mission is, I'm gonna have to call it filler content by default, as it literally just seems like a way to get the player to do something after the game is over and to fill up the city. The mission itself is really repetitive and would have called it filler anyways, but purely because it's post-game and isn't available while the story is still in play, it's definitely gonna be ranked as filler content in my books. Now, as for the Birdside mission, it's a pretty weird one, as when you're in the sewers during the main story, you overhear a broadcast saying that there are 2 groups that are fighting over chemical weapons, also known as Bane's Venom. In total, there are 3 gang fights that you break up, leading you to the My Alibi Club, where you find Bane's Lieutenant Bird, which is a callback to the Batman Nightfall comic, in which he has 3 lieutenants, Bird being one of them. But the only difference with this fight is that 2 goons are using the Venom, whereas in all the other street brawls, they were all just fighting over it, not actually using it. The fight in general isn't too bad to get through, but definitely more challenging than any of the other combat sections in this game. And once you apprehend Bird, he gives up who he is, Batman deduces that he works for Bane, and inevitably knocks him out. It's honestly one of the better combat style of missions, as yes, it is repetitive, but the fights get increasingly more difficult, with more goons being in the fights and the last fight not being such a cakewalk. Overall, I will not call this mission filler content, as it does put up a challenge and actually helps you with your combat, but I would not say it's actually worth playing. Again, like the Anarchy mission, the effort you put in versus the actual reward just isn't balanced and not worth it whatsoever. But the Nightfall reference was pretty cool. And now that we're finished with those 2, let's get started with the actual villain side mission, starting with the Black Mask Judge Stashes, which becomes playable after you finish with the Steel Mill section of the main story, in which as you're exiting the building, you come across one of Sionis' canisters, which you use explosive gel to destroy. And as we get to this mission, it starts to seem like a repeat of what we did with Bane back in Arkham City, as in that game, we destroyed all the Titan tanks in this exact same fashion, but only in that game, we worked with Bane to destroy them, only for him to turn on us in the end. But in this mission, when we destroy all of the canisters, we go to the church where we find and destroy the final one, which is in the exact same layout as Arkham City Church, which I think is such a cool callback. Black Mask then arrives with a bunch of goons, which turns into yet again another combat section of a boss fight, which you all know by now is not the best way to make a final fight for a mission, especially for a major villain in the game like Black Mask. It's honestly really annoying that Black Mask essentially got the exact same boss fight back to back in Origins and Night, as in Night, it's literally the same exact thing, but honestly easier, because in Origins, at least the enemies are harder to take down, and you have to leave Sionis for last to complete the fight. But for Night, you can literally just beat him down 3 times and he's done, which doesn't take long at all. Overall, this mission is definitely not worth it, and is definitely filler content for sure, because of how boring the actual mission is in itself, as all you're doing is beating up goons and destroying the canisters, and all the final fight is just a slightly difficult combat section. The only redeeming factor of this mission is probably the stealth section for the last canister, since that's the only stealth section involved with any of these canisters. But other than that, this mission is very much not worth playing, and honestly such a letdown for such an impactful character in this game. The Riddler is up next, and out of all the Arkham games, I'm gonna have to say that this is definitely on par with Arkham Asylum, both of them being the worst ones in the entire series, as in this game, just like in Asylum, you only ever make contact with him through your comms and never actually have a true boss fight with him like in City or Night. But Origins mission, in my opinion, is slightly better than Asylum, because it's a little more complicated to infiltrate the towers, with the player actively having to figure out how to get in, unlike Asylum, which are purely just the trophies. But aside from the data packs, I really like the integration of the towers in this game, as it's really different from all the other games in the series, which just play with the trophies and some secret rooms and challenges. But in this game, you have to actively figure out how to infiltrate the rooms using your gadgets and everything given to you in the moment. But I do think that the data packs, just like the Riddler trophies, are really annoying to find and collect and doesn't add much to the game as a whole. But I do think the data packs do give more depth to the story and gives more stakes to the player, as if you don't collect them, the Riddler will release all the information. Unlike in Night, the Riddler trophies don't do much other than giving access to a Riddler boss fight in the end. In my opinion, I wouldn't say this mission is filler content, as the data packs and towers give some significance to the story at hand, but the outcome at the end being just a Riddler trophy instead of an actual interaction with the man himself is just so disappointing, and is why I put this a little higher than Asylum in comparison of all the other Riddler missions in the series. The mission itself isn't filler per se, but I wouldn't recommend actually playing through it unless you're looking working to fully complete the game. Next up is the Mad Hatter's mission, which in my opinion is the best side mission in this entire game and probably the best visually designed Mad Hatter mission out of all the games in general. This mission is triggered once you leave the sewers and are met with 3 goons under the control of the Mad Hatter, aka Jervis Tetch, singing a message inviting Batman to his hideout to save a woman he had kidnapped. And once you come in contact with Hatter, Batman starts to become influenced by Tetch's mind control and starts seeing the world differently in his own mind, and instead of being in the room he once was, he sees Wonderland, as Jervis calls it. And the whole mission is basically getting through the several obstacles put in your way by Jervis to reach the end and save the woman. Now overall, this is one of my favorite missions because of how unique it is versus every other mission in this game, as it only has 2 small sections involving combat and the rest is just a trip through a really well designed platform section with some puzzles along the way to reach the end. I think Arkham Origins showed that they didn't need to have combat or any regular mechanics expected from a Batman game to make a mission good. I really like the fact that the game pivoted and made a completely unique section using several mechanics from Batman's arsenal that weren't just combat. Of course, the section is directed very similarly to the Red Hood section we played in the main game, and the ending is the same as the Ra's al Ghul ending in City, but even still, it was able to shine on its own and showed the amount of effort that was put into the section with the art design and the level direction as a whole. This mission is definitely one that should be played by anyone who likes the Arkham games, because in my opinion, it's one of the best missions any of the Arkham games ever produced, and is definitely not filler content whatsoever. Lady Shiva's mission is up next, and is up there with one of the shortest missions in this game, tying with both Deadshot and Bird, as in this mission, once you finish at the Gotham Bank when you're first introduced to Joker, you hear a baby crying in a crib within the area, and the moment you go to investigate the sound, Lady Shiva appears and attacks you and tells you that she has kidnapped the man and Batman has to save him before he's killed. And once you save him, it turns out to be a police officer who reveals that Shiva chased after his partner after he had apparently shot one of her ninjas. You are then led on a tracking mission with his blood trail, which leads you to his body killed by Shiva herself, as she appears for a second time in the mission, telling you to meet her at the Wonder Tower in Sheldon Park, where the boss fight finally begins and turns out to be a pretty difficult combat section, as Shiva has her ninjas to help fight you, along with her having her own unique fighting style as well. In the end, you don't ever actually end up locking her up as you do with the other assassins in the game, but are left on the cliffhanger with her case file being paused for the foreseeable future, as she never actually appears in any of the other Arkham games after this. Overall, I do think generally Shiva and Deadshot were very misused, as they are a part of the assassins that Black Mask paid to kill Batman, but are for some reason the only ones to be left out in their own side mission, as they don't have any story significance whatsoever, with them never appearing in the main story other than the introductory video at the beginning of the game. Honestly, the Shiva mission did not live up to expectations, as she is known to be a very skilled fighter and one of the best martial artists in DC as a whole, but we just get a lousy combat section instead of a one-on-one fight like we get with the Deathstroke fight. I definitely think that there was a missed opportunity with her character in this game, as she barely gets any screen time at all and is just subjected to a side mission for whatever reason. The mission isn't filler content, as you're still going through taking out the assassins hired by Black Mask, but it definitely isn't what any of us were expecting from a mission with a character like her, and could have been a lot better overall. And finally, we get to Deadshot, who we just mentioned a few seconds ago and is the last villain side mission we're going to be covering in this video. But before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've made it this far into the video, as I post videos every single week on either Saturday or Sunday, and have tons of shorts dedicated strictly to the Arkham games on this channel. So if you're into that sort of thing, subscribe and click the notification bell to keep up with my weekly uploads, as it helps me out a lot. But now with the promo out of the way, let's get back to the topic at hand, which is the final side mission in Arkham Origins, which is Deadshot. As previously stated in the Shiva portion of the video, he's one of the assassins hired by Black Mask to kill Batman, who was subjected to his own side mission instead of the main game along with Shiva. As in this mission, you get a signal from Alfred that there's an SOS broadcast in the area, and once you investigate, a police chopper appears and is shot down fairly quickly, leading to Batman setting up a crime scene to find the origin of the shot, which turns out obviously to be Deadshot's doing, as the shot in question is way too complex for anyone else to pull off. And when you find the bullet, it turns out that there's a radio signal written on it, and once you locate the signal, you hear a message from Deadshot conveying that he has a hostage at the Gotham City Bank, which leads into a whole stealth section that's not the hardest in the world, but definitely tougher than most other stealth sections in these games, as every time you take someone out, Deadshot knows exactly the direction you came from and can shoot you from anywhere in the bank, even if you throw a smoke bomb. The mission overall isn't that bad, as the crime scene that you go through isn't that long and still keeps you invested in the mission, as after one crime scene you get to Deadshot right away. I definitely think there should have been more crime scenes to investigate like in City, since only having one thing to investigate then getting straight to the boss isn't something I expected from a major villain in this game. As said before, I do think Shiva and Deadshot were terribly misused in this game, as their missions and boss fights don't even come close to the others in the game, as they get full-fledged sections dedicated to them in the game, whereas you get a couple of minutes with these two in their side missions. Overall, the mission is cool for what it is, but it isn't filler content in the slightest and definitely could have been better. But now we've reached the part you've all been waiting for, and after everything that's been said throughout this entire video, it's time to finally answer the question you've all been so eagerly patient to hear. Are Arkham Origins side missions worth playing, or are they just filler content? And my answer is yes. Most of the side missions in Arkham Origins are worth playing, with a few of them being outliers as filler content. But even though I say they're worth playing, a lot of these missions definitely missed the mark with their execution, as many of them are just repetitive combat sections and not much innovation that went into them. Specifically speaking on the villain side missions, as the end result that you get from the mission doesn't justify the amount of work that you have to put into actually finishing them. And a lot of the endings are either just combat sections as said before, or just an ending that's just not worth playing an entire mission for. In my opinion, the Mad Hatter mission is probably the only villain mission that I would really recommend to play, purely because of how unique it is, and because it doesn't have a combat section as the main purpose of the mission, like most of the missions we talked about in this video. Overall, most of the side missions are worth playing and not filler content whatsoever, but at the same time, the missions in themselves aren't the best and just didn't use the characters they had access to their full potential. Because when a mission that doesn't even have a single boss fight in it is better than some of the other missions that contain full-on villains, you have to know at that point something is definitely wrong, and that's all I gotta say about that. And with that, reaches the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as I post videos every single week and have several shorts on this channel dedicated to the Arkham games, so you're always part of content no matter what. Click on the back symbol to check out my deep dive on the Arkham City side missions, and the video to the right of that to check out my Marvel Spider-Man deep dive, which are both just like this video but just about those games. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you all next week with another video. Peace!